Hello and welcome back to Parley. These are my on-the-spot responses to the prompts you folks submit. Hope you'll enjoy listening. This one is from Just Rusty. It's about underused or underapplied, like not in as many games as it would benefit, customization options. This one has a lot of setup. We're going to tell you about a feature that might seem a little unexpected for the type of game it's in, but which Just Rusty, and I agree, think is really cool and a lot of people would really like, but is maybe just not thought of or associated with like this style of game. You'll see what I mean, and then we'll discuss. Just Rusty begins. I've been playing Marvel's Midnight Suns, a game probably most famous for being the thing the XCOM team did at Firaxis, that Firaxis did after XCOM 2. I think most interesting is that after making it, Jake Solomon pivoted to making his own studio and declared that his next game would be a life sim, something in the style of The Sims, due to what the team learned from Midnight Suns and how they found that interpersonal stuff with the team the most interesting part of the game to make. So to be clear, this is a like sort of top-down or eagle-eye view, turn-based tactical shooter, basically. Sort of, you break in, I don't know exactly how it works in this game, but there's a compound and you gotta very carefully sneak up to it and breach and clear and sequence how your units are moving in. It's a tactics-focused experience, a turn-based tactics game. But the team that made it immediately now has pivoted to making something of a life sim, like The Sims. What's going on there? Just Rusty says, okay, you've piqued my interest. What happened during this game's development to make you pivot from making one of the most successful turn-based tactics games, with a cultural reputation for unfairness and a steep difficulty curve, to wanting to make your own spin on The Sims? That's something. From a purely do I recommend this game perspective, I'm unsure. It's altogether too much of a AAA project for me. The game takes almost 2 to 3 hours to get going and bring all its systems online. Outside of academic interest, I don't think I would have stuck with the game. It gets better later has never been something I could encourage, unless the later comes after like an hour or less. And yeah, depending on the property, that doesn't really count as later. However, you sure can't accuse the folks at Firaxis team of taking that Marvel circa Infinity War money and churning out something bland. They had every opportunity to just make XCOM 2 with a Marvel coat of paint, but instead made something much stranger. It's a game of two halves, arguably two-thirds. One half is turn-based combat with a very odd card-based system. Okay? The best way I can describe it is that this half of the game is Slay the Spire, or is to Slay the Spire, what Duelist is to Magic the Gathering. It's equal parts card game and positioning tactics game. Oh, okay, interesting, sure. If you look up footage of Duelist, that's Duelist but with a YST at the end instead of IST, you'll see it's basically a trading card game, but it's played on a tactics board. And you move your units as you summon them in. You can only summon new units near other units you have summoned in, unless they have the keyword that lets you balance that. Anyway, yeah. So it's like that. It's XCOM. It's a tactics-based breach and clear kind of shooter, but also your abilities are on cards. All right, that's odd. So they went out of their way to experiment with something. Enemy variety is very low, with gameplay only occasionally mixed up by named supervillains, but hero variety is very high. I take this to mean your player characters offer many different gameplay options. The game is much more interested in fun ways to bounce your team's different powers off each other against a blob of faceless goons than to make wide varieties of enemy types. The other half of the game is managing the team. A day gets split into morning at the base, and encounter, then evening. The morning features all the stuff one might expect from an XCOM-style game. You're deciding which teammates to give training to, what to research, which character abilities to upgrade, and then the evening part of the game is all social interactions. Characters come to you with personal problems. You're picking dialogue options, which will improve your friendship with the cast, attending clubs, going on hangouts, platonic dates, deciding which gifts your teammates might like best, and buying new outfits for the team. Interesting, a little bit like the gameplay loop of something like Fire Emblem Three Houses or Persona, where there's a divide between the social management part of the game and then a combat thing that is connected but not like extremely directly connected. To an extent, I would argue these games are also roguelike. They're like the roguelite part of roguelike, which is now a core part of the genre, where you do a run, and that's kind of immediate gameplay, but then between runs, you do some long-term development things. This game sounds like it's unlike a roguelike in that the immediate gameplay like isn't randomized and then you reset when you die, but it still has the rhythm that you do an immediate thing and then kind of plant seeds for the future. Immediate thing, plant seeds for the future kind of vibe. And this is also a pretty popular way to tell stories because it gives you different modes really frequently. It's interesting in the Persona games too, since the world of Persona, or the, fantasy, its inception, anime inception, world of Persona means that things like buying a model gun will become a real gun when you're in the Persona world. And so you can do like normal high schooler things. It's normal for high schoolers to buy a BB gun, I don't know, whatever, Japan. And then in the, whatever world, the Phantom world, it will, I keep forgetting what it's called in Persona people, leave me alone. I loved that game. It's just been a while. You have that thing as a real weapon. And so that's an interesting way to weave those together. Interesting. Okay. So we can see a little bit how this is getting towards, they're going to want to make a social sim next. They thought that longer term, or like out of combat loop of the game, whatever you want to call it, maybe it's not longer term, is impacted the game. And they thought that was really interesting. This brings us to why I made the parlay, Just Rusty says. The way outfits work in this game is apparently a standard for life sims, but I have not seen it before. I'll include a screenshot of what is, in my opinion, the best button in the game. I didn't include it here, forgive me. It's just a switch to change outfits daily, which can be applied on or off for every character individually. So you can unlock outfits in this game. You could imagine, Captain America, which we'll get to as an example later. Does he wear the same uniform every day? Does he wear your favorite Captain America outfit every day? Does he wear a different Captain America outfit every day? You can choose this, and if you want Black Widow to wear different things or the same thing every day, well, you can change that option for her individually too. I don't know it doesn't matter which characters, The game gives you one resource after each mission, which covers all cosmetics, and rather than just picking the best option for each team member and then never touching the system again, you're instead encouraged to consider which of these outfits would add to this character's wardrobe, as each morning a random fit from all unlocked outfits will be selected. A daily Bungle branded tee might not be the most exciting Spider-Man outfit, but I believe he would wear it in his off days when he's behind on laundry, so it gets unlocked. The Doctor Strange shirt and trousers option will absolutely not be unlocked, and I refuse to believe this version of the character ever wears anything that isn't embroidered with sigils and runes. You also have the option to say, Captain America is a soldier and probably just has 15 of the same pressed white shirt and combat slacks, so you could switch this off for him, right? This brings us to the question of the parlay. What UI features from genres, which often get looked down on for being soft genres, have we been missing out on? This is a feature I would genuinely love to see in pretty much every game with cosmetic options, where characters get outfits as one piece, but probably not ones where the fashion involves mixing and matching a variety of pieces, unless you had the option to save multiple set combinations, which I have seen that before. Great and complicated parlay question. Sure. Okay, so there's a couple of pieces to unpack here. First of all, this soft genres idea is a huge part of the parlay, but you have not elaborated on too much. I will do that part. I think that's relevant. We won't spend forever on it, though. Like, where would we be looking for features like this? And indeed, maybe, why is this not as popular? Like, that seems a little odd. I think I have a satisfying answer to that question. And then what would be some more of them? That's going to be hard with anything like this, but I'm going to have a few things that come to mind, like saving certain loadouts in build systems. Of course, I'm going to say that, but I do think that's a good example. And like groups of settings, taking notes in game, some form of taking notes in game, I believe is a very underused feature that would very obviously improve most games. Many games, maybe not most. Let's do it. Okay. So the idea is that in a game like The Sims, this is a game that is considered to be, in some way, you're using the term soft. I'm going to propose a hypothesis that we'll throw out if it comes to not be useful, but my knee-jerk reaction is it's basically just games where there isn't a clear success condition. You don't need to win by doing X, and therefore making decisions that don't make you win is considered more of a normal or stable orbit. And you could see The Sims as being a game like this. I want to highlight that that is a mode of play as well. It's not really wrong or less correct to play Midnight Suns in a way that is less laser focused on only winning. After all, you don't need to do that to succeed at these games. It's very common for games with build systems in them to provoke an audience reaction where many people are asking what the best build for this character is. And, you know, the thing that's recommended will not be the best, the most mathematical performance you could ever get out of that character. It will be the most straightforward, good build that you can give to people as general advice. If you don't know anything else about their team, this would be the best in a platonic vacuum dimension that doesn't exist. But if you do know anything about your team, which you probably do, then it wouldn't be that. But since I don't know those things, the recommendation that will rise to the top will be this generalist option. Nothing wrong with that, but it's not the best damage you could do, basically ever, especially if you don't know their specific team. And it also isn't adapted to like the rest of their kit, the rest of their loadout. It's very common that players legitimately just don't understand that that decision making is the point of the game. It's supposed to be fun. If you want an answer out of the game, this is just the right answer, you literally just don't want to play that game. The game has an entire part of itself that is not serving you. It's not there for a thing you want. But players often don't understand this, or the game developers even don't fully engage with this. This will be relevant and we'll come back to it later. The reason it matters here is that a lot of the time, if those answers aren't available, people then think that that means that the game isn't about like doing the best you can. It's just a casual game. But knowing that correct, it's not, but anyway, answer isn't what the other games are about either. They just present a way that you could, but it isn't that effective to do so, oversimplify the game. Whereas these other games don't present a way you could, but it isn't effective to do so, oversimplify these games. In neither game is that what the game is about, or actually an effective way to play the game, if that's what you cared about. It's just that one game has the appearance of being able to oversimplify that, and the other game doesn't. I'm not sure that's actually that big of a difference, is the interesting thing. In a way, you could say that the games with a less clear success condition are more hardcore. Because, like, what do you do? I think The Sims is a more hardcore game by a long shot. Because to do anything in it, you have to organize a whole ton of stuff and coordinate this whole city. I don't know. I'm an ex-roller coaster tycoon fanatic as well. I think those games are by far more involved and sweaty in a sort of way, because just success was never meaningful, is never meaningful in pretty much all these games. I'll grant you, there is a small category over here where there are these games that, yeah, the game is kind of about getting the most effectiveness, the actual most effectiveness out of the stuff in the game. This would be like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy XIV raiding specifically would be an example of that kind of stuff. Where, yeah, the point of the encounter is to be coordinated in lockstep, like a military almost, and execute everything, like, correctly. And they really have mathematically calculated out what, as far as we know right now, the best way to do that damage is, like, kind of like a speed run as well. And the goal of the activity is not to deviate from that. The goal is to just pick the right answer. Now, you'll note that in any of these games that are any good, at least in my opinion, Final Fantasy XIV, well, you don't really spec a class to have certain abilities, like, be available over others. Exactly. At least that was my understanding. Dipping my toes. I dipped pretty deep into Final Fantasy, but anyway. You know, if you're a red mage, you have the red mage kit. You might use it in some slight variant ways, or briefly think on your feet, but you mostly play the red mage rotation. And even in something like World of Warcraft, where there's a kind of false build system, where you do technically choose, you click from different options. You could, in theory, physically click this other option, which abilities you have, which sub-spec, basically which subclass you are for a given class. If you're an enhancement shaman, this is pretty much the rotation that the game put in that does good raid damage. And so you'll operate that in a basically mathematically deterministic way. And here's the key thing, you could do that in lots of games, but the game is designed around that level of damage. If you don't do that level of damage, or within 1% of it, your raid party wipes instantly. That's how these games are designed. I think that having that perspective point, I think many players don't even know that games like that exist. And with that perspective point, hopefully it makes it more clear. Obviously, these other games are not about that. They're about you being able to choose. You could make the game not about you being able to choose, but to do that, you need a timer that says something like, after 15 minutes, the boss goes berserk and kills everybody. And you have like the leeway of 5 seconds while your teammates are being smashed in to like maybe do the last little bit of damage, and then you get a dramatic win. But basically, the timer goes after 15 minutes, and the raid boss gets an overpowered combat buff to kill everybody, because the point of the game is to optimize your damage to do this thing. The point of that part of the game. My point is, for almost all games, this is not the case. Like nearly every game where people ask what the best option is or whatever, that's not relevant or what the game is about. The game is not designed to cater to or value that knowledge in some meaningful way. And even though players often wrongly believe that those builds are the most effective and it's wrong and you're doing something bad by not using them, there is no material loss to not using them. And indeed, enfranchised players often come up with very clearly better, if you care about that, strategies. You do not get the best damage on this team by running this character with this stuff. That's just the best answer if we know nothing else about your account. But a player that understands the game systems could easily make a build that would be better at this if they like knew stuff about the game. And so could you, but you just wrongly believe that this build is good and better than anything else you come up with, and you wrongly value that the game is about doing the best you possibly can, even though that doesn't actually do anything in the game. Again, I'll grant you there's a whole side topic that is now not that related to this parlay, where some games, like, you can finish the content faster, and so you can optimize for your busy life by clearing it quicker. And I think it is not a bad idea for games to maybe consider not doing that, because it sort of imposes this is the best way to do it onto a part of the game that presumably is only fun because there is not one single answer to it. Make your content brief, but not able to be trivialized or skipped. Maybe that's a good heuristic. Anyway. So here we've arrived at a way of thinking about how, like, the sweatiness of games, basically. I would argue then that the reason these types of features are not in more games is not because of a perception that those other games are like soft or whatever. It is an over focus on the audience or the developer on like getting things done, an end, things being a means to an end. That is already not what most of these games are about. And I think the reason that these things are happening, like the story of this parlay happened recently to you, is because there's an increased awareness from developers and players that it is kind of pointless to be playing a game in a way where your goal is to not play the game more. If the game is really if the game is about choices or it isn't, if the game gives you choices and you're not meant to just deduce the most mathematical output and then do it, you don't have to do that to win, then the game is about you stopping to smell the roses. So put in features that are about doing that and design the game around that a little bit. My diagnosis of the problem that is the inciting incident of this parlay is that people are not doing that as much as they could be, or that we are in a punching the microphone, and accurately enough, we're in a transitional phase between people thinking that way and people thinking in this more instructive or like a prescriptive way. You have to do things in this one way. This is a video games or a thing where you try to succeed, and so decisions are about whether they make you succeed. And like, it's not irrelevant. That's just a really oversimplified way to think about how humans have fun. When lion cubs wrestle and play with each other, the goal is not to win, really. They're just trying to get in a better position because it's fun. And if you've ever seen kids or like some other animals play, even adult animals, because they get it in a way that adult humans are maybe not mature enough to understand, like when you have won and you're in an advantageous position in the lion cub wrestling match, you know, you let up a little bit because it's more fun for there to be more of a struggle. And you'll see children and also animals do this. You'll see some adults doing it because it's more fun. Obviously, you need to ride a line. If you and I are playing chess and you say, I want you to go, you know, I want a real match. I want you to play as hard as you can and try to, I'm not that good at chess, so you're fine. But anyway, and I don't do that, that might not be mature because I'm not respecting your earnest request. Or it might be that we don't have a very mature connection and I can't know if you're earnestly requesting that. I think you said that, but you're implying that socially you want me to be nice and not, brutalize you in the chess game. If we're close friends, none of that. You tell me the thing you want and I get to believe you. Like, that's how a real friendship works. But sometimes in society, we don't know for sure that that's, you get it. Whatever. In a general sense, obviously it's nice to like get to fiddle around a little. It's not really about winning necessarily, but about continuing or trying. And games can weave this in. We have lots of good examples of, just recently I was playing Slay the Princess, for example, which does a very good job in the thread of something like Disco Elysium or Baldur's Gate 3, significantly different games, but they, I think, all do this pretty well, where you can play through making a bad decision, dialogue decisions in particular. There's a noteworthy scene at the very beginning of Disco Elysium where you can run away from paying the debt to your room that you had a bender in and filled with booze and woke up in, mostly naked. And then you go downstairs and you're asked to pay, and you can run away. When you run away, you can trip over a woman's wheelchair. Well, you can pass a dexterity-like check to try to not trip over her wheelchair. But if you fail it, then you crash into her wheelchair. She doesn't get hurt. You don't get super hurt. You might take a point of health damage, but that's not a big deal in this game. Just go get some booze. You'll be fine. And she offers to pay some of the money. You are invariably, undeniably, in a better situation than you were in before. You materially gain money, or you don't have to pay some money you would have had to pay by failing the check. And this is, of course, very intentional. The game is trying to teach you to resist that instinct of just making everything perfect, of save scumming, as the game very rigorously allows you to do. Baldur's Gate has this problem as well. Slay the Princess, and you might look at something like Gnosia, Gnosia, Gnosia. Slay the Princess is a choose-your-own-adventure game where the explicit goal of the game, very minor spoiler for Slay the Princess, but I won't tell you any of the framing or lore, is to experience lots of different paths through the game. The game explicitly asks you, someone in the game asks you to experience many different paths in the game. I won't tell you any more about Slay the Princess. I recommend this game. Go play it. You'll figure it out just fine. Pretty accessible game in my opinion. It can be, has some horror and body horror, gore elements, but they give you a warning about that. Just keep an eye out and you'll be completely fine. They give you options to fiddle with that a little bit, so you should be okay. And you'll have time to refund it if those things are not to your taste. Game is pretty good for that. The point is, the whole point of the game, the goal you're presented with, is to follow the fail states in the game, of which there are many, or arguably there are only fail states in the game. And so you inherently have debugged a little bit the human tendency to feel like I just have to do everything right. I have to do it by the letter of the law. This is the way you do it. That is pointless. That's a pointless way to live your life in general. It's pointless in most video games too, except as an occasional exercise where you're deliberately going in and doing that. So the game tries to disarm that behavior because it gets in the way of most fun. I believe you could take a perspective where almost all current human entertainment currently makes this mistake. In other words, literally almost all human entertainment is much less fun than it would be once it realizes and engages with the psychological reality of the fact that people are trying to do it right and therefore deleting the fun. To call to this, you can't just force everyone to be different. You can't just stamp your foot. They reacted that way for a reason. So what you need to do is make games that are about not just succeeding, that are about trying different options. You can even do this in other hybrid ways we've talked about in Parley somewhat recently. If you make a build system focused game and you want to encourage the player to experiment with build systems, give them situations where they have to make a build that is literally bad somehow. Make them not use any of these like major powerful kind of upgrade or complete a challenge with naked or whatever, with no armor items on. To hit home that it's meant to just be fun, to do the best you can. This build isn't going to be good compared to what you had before. So that's not what it's about. That was never what it was about. It was about trying some new thing. And then if you make the player get a reward for using a lot of different builds, you're increasingly weaving in this idea that, yeah, it's helpful to have a powerful build, but exactly how good the build is, it was never relevant, was never going to be relevant. It can still be fun to know exactly how powerful the build is in some way. I often do my most technical calculations for games, for builds I'm making, when the game doesn't privilege how powerful the build is, just because I want to know or to engineer a certain combo. If the game is about exactly how strong that is, I will not even bother to engineer such a combo, because I know that if I did, I would need to not only plan out the build, but also calculate the damage the build would do. And if the build doesn't do more than this amount of damage, it would be useless for that piece of content, which is boring. I want to do this action in the game, and try playing the game that way. I'm not fussed about whether I completely succeed or completely fail. I'm not even interested in the game if it's about that, and it would be kind of lame if you completed 2/3 of a dungeon and got literally 0 loot. So the game isn't like that. I'm thinking of a specific game in my head right now, and therefore rewards you partly for those things. And so it's fun to try and vaguely fail, but you are still moving forward and getting resources. Developers, might I suggest, if you have a system where you get rewarded for going partway through a challenge, and then you get more rewards for succeeding, that you consider rebalancing how much of the reward you get for succeeding. That is, maybe consider making that part a little lower. Don't make so much of the reward be for completely succeeding, because then you're inching it toward being efficient to just try. If the player gets 2/3 of the way through a run, and they get 2/3 of the rewards, but then they lose, they're not going to get in the habit of like, oh, I got a lot of rewards, therefore maybe I should just have cut out then. Because you can pretty easily balance it so that the third of the run still gives you enough rewards that it would be faster to just try to clear it than to reset the run. I don't think that that's that difficult to measure out mathematically. Another trick I've seen used, actually this game I have in mind is using, is to make the end of a run in a game, at the end of the challenge, be shorter than the other parts of the challenge. So even if all 3 parts give you equal rewards, and you get through the easier first 2 parts, and then you would consider quitting to like farm faster or something, the 3rd part gives you the reward of being shorter. So if you consider doing it instead, yeah, it's harder, but if you win, you'll get resources at a more efficient pace than would have been possible by resetting. Not that hard to do. You can just make the third of the run in this example slightly shorter than the other parts. Have them all reward you equally, and then it will be efficient to attempt to win, even knowing you could lose, with a certain balance of the times involved anyway. And this should be enough. You don't have to do it perfectly. Most people aren't calculating this stuff out in their heads, and some people do. That's fine if they enjoy that. You just have to make it close enough that the player isn't hung up on, like, am I losing massive amounts of resources by doing this thing? One more tiny suggestion would be to create a player summary. If the player quits out of a game at a certain point, what if you show them how long the game was open and what currency they got in that time? Then they can just see, oh, I spent all day losing roguelike runs in this game, but per hour, I actually got really good currency. And then the player is seeing, oh, I might have associated that session with failure, but actually it's been going pretty well. And it was perfectly fine to just try and fail like that. I think in most cases, all you need is to show the player that that is the case. That's it. And so for a lot of these systems, I've spent over half the parlay now talking about how to get players on board with using this type of feature, you need to get the player debugged from the idea that it's just about like doing the things that make you succeed. I'm sure some people, including me, I'm somewhat embarrassed to admit, listened to the part of the parlay that you talked about at the end and said, wait, do the outfits like do anything? I'll read it again. This brings us to why I made the parlay. The outfits, the way outfits work in this game is apparently a standard for life sims, but I have not seen it before. The best button in the game is the option to change outfits daily, which can be applied on or off for each character individually. The game gives you one resource after each mission, which covers all cosmetics, and rather than just picking the best option for each team member and then never touching the system again, you're instead encouraged to consider which of these outfits would add to this character's wardrobe, as each morning a random fit from all unlocked outfits will be selected. I'm sure that a lot of you naturally thought when you heard that, wait, but what do the outfits do anything? It's like, well, of course they do. They make the character look different. Yeah, but like, do they give you any stats? And it's a no, I think, right? That's sort of the whole point of this. So, what is the point of micromanaging them? Now, we're going to assume for the sake of argument, and it probably is true, it seems like a game that isn't making mistakes like this, that the currency to get the outfits is exclusive to that and set aside just for that currency. You're not choosing to get an outfit that only affects your appearance over something that would be affecting like your numerical performance in the game, if you will. Well, let's just assume that as a starting basic idea. And so again, I do think the remaining barrier is you don't have to eliminate this barrier of will the players spend resources on that. Just give them a resource unique to that. But the question really is, would the player care enough to change this option in this game when there is this competing idea of if you do these things, you'll like have numerically succeeded? I think it is worth engaging for a moment with just how deeply baked this disconnect is for a lot of people. For many people, if it doesn't improve your 401k or give you a visible asset like a house or a car or a spouse or whatever, which is unfortunately how some people think about their partners, it doesn't matter. Taking a philosophy class doesn't matter because it doesn't give you any money. Well, at least not the way I'm using it. And it, actually, I found one of the few ways you can. Anyway, go figure. Thank you for supporting Parley. That's not true for me and basically no one else. Slaps microphone. That's right. Get out of here. You get it. Then it doesn't do anything because it's just thinking about stuff, which doesn't do anything. This is, of course, nonsense. Nothing in life matters but how you frame things. Having a house, car, and spouse in this example, I guess. Can you imagine? Would disgusting. Anyway, do whatever you want. Would not make you happy if you didn't have a mindset where you would be happy. The only thing that matters is what you think about these things. Not only are those things not the only things that matter, they actually are the only things that don't matter in many cases. You can't directly buy happiness. Money can be used as a mechanism to be happier or better off once you have a mindset that can sustainably create happiness, but only as a tool to help improve the only part that actually matters, which is the way you think through the things you're doing. But players don't have their heads on straight about this. Almost all of humanity doesn't have their head on straight about this because they're too busy putting out fires in everyday life. So they don't feel like they have time to pay the only drawback of thinking through things in your life, which is the upfront cost. You do, not really ongoing throughout your life, but at some point, at least once, hopefully not too many times, sit down and rethink your life a little bit. And this feels like too much of a cost for a lot of people. Now, it's pretty obviously beneficial in the same way that if you buy a Starbucks drink for $4 a day, every day, and you consider buying a coffee setup to just make your own damn Starbucks drink, even if the setup is like $300 or $400, that pays for itself after like a few months of not getting Starbucks drinks. You'll also get your drink faster because it's very easy to make these drinks quickly if you're not working in a professional setting. And it'll taste better because large coffee shops with so much throughput have to make shortcuts that you as a solo barista, in this case, don't have to make. It's much easier to make the drink good if you're not working at Starbucks. The people working at Starbucks actually have to be rather skilled in a sort of unique way to even get the drink to be like decent consistently and in a reasonable amount of time. It's a lot easier to pull a good espresso, for example, if you just need to pull one at the beginning of the day. So it will be easier for you to produce the same drink, or you'll be able to produce a better drink. And I don't think anybody is really arguing the economics of that decision, right? That magically somehow, if your coffee setup is $300, it like doesn't pay off after, however many months that would be at $4 a day. Let's just quickly calculator. Starbucks drinks are expensive, but let's just say 4. And we're gonna do 3. Your coffee setup is $300. Is that reasonable? You can make reasonable milk drinks that are comparable to something you get at Starbucks for $300. Okay, sure. We don't have to get into it that much. It's not a coffee video. Divided by 4, 75 days, so 2.5 months. I don't think anybody is earnestly arguing that isn't cheaper. Like, it just is. You can just do math and it is. Some people will hand wave a little because they don't want to feel like they should be doing this, but they're just failing to. So they would like to make it out like actually that somehow wouldn't work. And so they'll try to say something like, oh, but I don't know how to do it, or like I wouldn't be able to do it as well. That's nonsense, of course. Like, no, I could show you a process that basically anybody that your 5-year-old child could do consistently correctly, that will make a drink that is comparable to what you're getting at Starbucks, much cheaper. And yeah, the materials of the drinks, of course, but I've done that for the latte I make for my partner every morning. It's like $1.30, I think. And we use extremely good ingredients, probably much higher quality coffee, especially than most people would use every day. But because we're making it manually, it's just really cheap. Like that, it doesn't end up being, it's like a couple of nights out to dinner a year to have amazing coffee drinks whenever you want forever. Basically unlimited of, a delicious beverage. I would hope that once we've disarmed any of the like landmines in the way, if you really saw the process and then saw the math of like paying off that equipment by not buying your Starbucks latte, there would be no room for argument that it is an efficient trade. Once again, the argument is very clearly that people don't see that logic. Not that they actually disagree with the actual argument as it's constructed, but that they won't construct the actual argument because they feel very busy in their lives. I see this as being heavily related here because people won't want these features in the same way unless they feel like they have time or a good reason to be using them a certain way. I think this is the time that I'm most likely to come up with more features people would want to use if they had a different mindset about the subject, which we've established why they don't, at least according to me. So these would be things like, I know a lot of people don't use multiple loadouts or like build switching things in the game or respec in games. And that's partly because if they have a build that works, they don't really see the point of changing it into something else. But this can be a very core part of the experience. Another example is like in Monster Hunter Wilds, there's this mechanic where you go out with a set of gear and you can save a couple of presets, they're loadouts basically, for like packing your bags. So you set up a monster and you're going to hunt it down. You're going to go hunt a Rathalos or whatever. And you go into your tent and you can click one of your presets and that will pack those items into your bag. You could have, I have 3. I have a lighter set, a more involved set, and then this one that uses specific items when you're using Mushroom Mancer, whatever it's called. I normally don't bring the mushrooms. I bring potions that do things like them. When I'm using Mushroom Mancer, I bring those things. I forget what it's called. Mushroom. Anyway, you know what I mean if you play Monster Hunter. The thing that lets you get buffs from eating mushrooms. I've got the mushroom one, I got the heavier one, I got the lighter one. Now, why? Why not just bring the heavier one every time and not bother with Mushroom Mancer because it requires you to change your whole loadout? Well, because you can carry more stuff that you gather while you're out if you have a lighter loadout. That's right, you have more bag space in your inventory if you pick a smaller loadout. So I think it's pretty clearly useful to have multiple different loadouts. And the game has a system that lets you do this pretty easily, but it doesn't explain or demonstrate that you can do that or make different loadouts as clearly as it could, at least not when I played. The game all but shows you that it's there and even has a few presets, but doesn't walk you through, but why would you want to do that? I think that a lot of people currently, because they have the dissonance of not really having time to invest in the upfront cost of using features like this, but they see other people using them, basically conclude that with the dissonance that it must just be a rich person thing. That isn't actually beneficial or fun. It's just a pastime for people who have too much time on their hands. And no, it's not. It's actually something pretty much everybody finds fun, categorically finds fun, and is sort of the entire point of life that you make these choices. The world is just not in a good place right now. The world is wrong, not you, not us enjoying these features. I definitely agree that it is a privilege to have the time to use them. We're fully on the same page about that, but that's not the same as it just being bad. That's another defense reaction. You don't want to be missing out on something good, so it's easier to just say those people are being bad. Or those fussy rich people with their fancy, I don't know, I used coffee as an example before, caviar or whatever. I'm sure that's not actually good. It tastes bad. They're just salty fish eggs. It's just, dirty water, muddy water. It doesn't taste good. They're just spending their time on that because they have the time. And no, those things actually do taste good and would taste good from a perspective that you could acquire it's just not your fault that you haven't acquired that perspective. And I think the thing that makes it a shame with games is that this is the place, right? This is the place for that. So what other features could there be? So obviously, like, loadout slots is a decently big one. I do think that, as with many of these features, loadout slots are sometimes a part of the discussion in a game where I'm not sure it actually makes that much sense to include them. There's just a finickiness to the game, and maybe addressing that some other way might be good. Just because people are asking for these things in a game doesn't then make it a good choice. There's that developer statement: players are often right about what the problem is, but wrong about what the solution is, or they haven't identified what would make the most sense in context as a solution. They just thought of the first solution they thought of, but the problem they've identified really is some underlying thing worth addressing. Sure, if you modify the quote that way, I guess I agree. But again, these are somewhere, like, you can't easily see people using them. Let's explore it the way you said it a little bit more. What are these genres that are considered maybe soft or whatever? Another one that comes to mind, but that maybe isn't considered this way, would be the sort of factory builders. So Factorio, or there's all these games right now that are like, you make potions, you brew potions. And I think these are games that often allow you the ability to kind of set up your workflow in a custom way, but why? Like, why not do it in this more efficient way? And indeed, my experience has been that there is a decent economy of players looking up like answers or examples in these games, even though I would hope very clearly the entire point of the game is to, like, just pack out your own weird thing yourself. I don't know. Is that not sort of the point on some level? And you can have both. I recall a Tears of the Kingdom video I saw recently where someone is trying to make a vehicle with one fan have stability, control, and speed relatively equal to a hover bike with two fans. This is a very popular thing in Tears of the Kingdom you might be familiar with if you've seen it. That thing that's a control stick and then a fan and then a fan. That you can build a very simple hover bike that way. They're trying to make a vehicle that surpasses that, I guess mostly in battery efficiency, which you could argue doesn't really matter that much. You get it back really fast when you land, but go figure. And that game has a good fix for this in that, yeah, if they make that vehicle, you can copy a QR code on the Switch 2 and just have that vehicle. And that vehicle is very stable, has pretty much the highest possible battery life for a stable vehicle, because it has the one fan and then a very light item, and then the steering stick. Pretty much the minimum possible build, unless you could make it stable with only the steering stick and a fan, which I don't think you can, but go figure. That would be the best build, but you recharge your zonite energy very fast when you land on the ground. So what's the point of not just using way more of it? I mean, it depends. It's based on your playstyle. That's the whole point. And so having that exist doesn't then invalidate a player's other options, as long as they aren't very close-minded about like what the purpose of this could be. As long as they're willing to say, just because a content creator invented this machine, it doesn't mean I am now not allowed by law to make my own machines because they might be a bit worse. Like, so what? And I mean, they're gonna be faster if you put way more fans on it. It'll definitely be faster. Sure, maybe overall you won't feel like the car is the best experience compared to going to the dealership and buying a Nissan or whatever. Okay, but there will certainly be advantages to the car you built yourself, like, I don't know, some custom seating or specs. Maybe it's faster, perhaps cheaper if you didn't need to do the safety inspections. Anyway, you get the point. So I think what's breaking my brain about this topic is that logic largely bars any of this from a lot of people's consideration, which makes it harder to think about like what UI features or what features in these games are we missing out on that people would actually use that are in these other games. To be honest, I think I'm guilty as everybody to some extent. I often overlook these features because the way the game is currently set up, it's kind of a beggars can't be choosers situation. I can barely get the game to do the basic thing the game is doing and respect my time on a basic level. So I'm going to prioritize having interesting decisions to make, but I'm not going to try to reach for the extra stuff the game has to offer. The game is already faffing me about altogether too much. But I'll give you an example that came to mind that is like this. A lot of these like waifu chasing gacha games have this thing where you can like do the social subset of the things in the game, like give the person gifts or go on an outing or like get a meal or something. There's like a dating sim light in a lot of these games, and often the character will have like a reputation or like trust or affection bar or whatever, depending on your flavor of waifu gacha game. And when this fills up to a certain amount, you get like a special thing from them, like a login screen where they have a cool different outfit or a sexy outfit, depending on what style of game this is, or whatever it is. You get these things, right? And obviously the player is likely to have, you know, a few of these, a good few of these. I have played some games where you can and some games where you can't shuffle these if they're on your home screen. Man, I've really been punching the mic a lot during this parlay. Sorry. Excited about this subject, but I just don't know what to do with it. I have played a good number of games where you can shuffle those. You can make it so a new one will appear each time, or set the behavior of like if they say a voice line when you return to your home screen, do they say it every time or only once per day? Or does the animation show different times or what? And you can click them to get like some lore. And so a lot of the time you might want to swap in units to like learn more about them if you're just interested. And some games have you do this manually, which is really annoying. It's very hard to do that. It's not fun to do that. Don't like that. A lot of the time, if you give me this many characters, I'm going to earnestly forget a character I was interested in that I want. And therefore, on a pragmatic level, it's just less work to shuffle them. But I know for some people, that part of the game just inherently doesn't interest them because it doesn't feel connected enough to like the rest of the game. And I want to resist the urge here to say, oh, give the player like a little reward to their reputation with that character if they engage with the character in some way. And then it will give them a pragmatic number. And then we can get the player to do the thing in the game. You could do that, but this parlay is assuming we're not doing that. We're not giving the player a carrot that makes it so they want to change outfits every day. We're just trying to make that feature available and then engage with what it would take for people to use it. And that is much harder. You could absolutely just game incentivize all these things directly, give it a number. But my argument is that that actually isn't getting to the heart of the issue. The heart of the issue is, why do you need it to be that the game proves to you that your decision was good? That's not what you would want if you were given enough time with the game. That's just what people want in they have limited free time in passing. And so how do we engage with adding these things in where they seem relevant and useful, but just like without simply bribing the player to use them? Because you are basically forcing the player to use them if they want to do that, and that creates its own problems. Genshin Impact has an Animal Crossing-like thing, and if you max it out, or grind it out really, you can get the game to give you about an 8th day of the week worth of stuff. You are meaningfully better off for having, ask me why I know, max that out. But I bet a lot of people who play Genshin Impact otherwise do not want to play Animal Crossing. It makes sense in the game. You can include the characters that you've gotten on your account in your like little pocket dimension village that you have. It's not a weird feature to include. I don't think that's like dumb or silly that they included that, but it's also pretty obvious that not everybody will want to feel like they need to do it, or they'll be missing out on an 8th day of the week worth of in-game currency that mostly affects the other parts of the game, like the combat or whatever. Right? You're basically just holding a gun to the player's head and saying, I'll delete an 8th day of the week of your life if you don't play Animal Crossing to get the rest of the stuff in this game. That's bad also. That is also not good. You have to play dress up or I won't give you this effectiveness in Marvel Midnight Suns. No, probably don't do that. I don't know if that's that great of an idea. So I talked about the theory of these features a lot and talked about where I think they fit a lot. I didn't give you a lot of examples besides like loadouts and build system stuff of features that you could put in other games because I don't know them. But I will keep more of an eye out for that. And I do think there are some. I just think that in many cases, it's more a matter of refactoring the whole game to be focused on different things and to not kind of pseudo bribe the player to care only about like the numerical effectiveness in the game, and that is the thing that would just make lots of options be these kind of, it's nice to have and you could just engage with it how you want, customize things to your preferences, but it's not like necessary or a core part of the game as per se, just something you might be interested in. And I would argue that if you solve for this, that will gradually make the entire climate of people playing video games more interested in certain genres of game as well, because they will see them as having more of a point, more of a real point, rather than just how do you win, which often isn't that interesting of a goal. Or maybe this is all metagaming way too much and you think I'm meta-cogitating myself into circles and this is unrealistic and game design is about making there be an in-game reward for the thing. You should of course gain some currency by changing outfits daily or by wearing an outfit you haven't worn in a while or by keeping the same uniform every day. There should be some kind of weird meta set bonus to doing these things. That's fine. That is a very different approach from the one that I took that I strongly disagree with. But there you go. I would love to see that. I just don't think it'll be very popular or effective. That's just my opinion. That's this parlay. Because I could not think of a ton of specific examples for you, I hope that it was a worthy consolation prize to try to talk about the framing of these features or what constructs these features feeling useful or relevant to people. And I reckon that you and I are simply in a group where we have enough time available that most of this parlay is really not an issue for us. If you're considering these features or you just have incredible strength of character, let's assume it's the latter. But I do think that for many people, there is a more fundamental psychological thing in the way that has to do with the premise of play, why people are even playing games. So I tried to describe that. I hope that made some sense. Granted, this was a very abstract and philosophical parlay. Pass judgment as you will. Looking forward to the next one. Folks, if you'd like your own one of these, you can use that using a link in the description. And I know some of you folks just support the show that way. So thank you very much. I appreciate your support. Looking forward to the next one.